Well, we're gonna
President David, we have visiting today from Lake Hickory, Rotary is Jim Whitworth, and we have from Lenore, Sunny Hines, and that's it.
Okay, how about visitors? Cliff.
My guest for today is Rick Nicotelli. He's the store manager of Lowe's Foods up at 29th Avenue and
Okay. Anybody else on the right-hand side? How about down the middle? Leslie.
President David, I have my mother with me here today, that's Farrell.
Okay, Sonny, you want to introduce?
I'm pleased to introduce my wife who's at the same table, Harriet Hines. Nice to have her with us.
Okay, anybody else down the center? Okay, left side. Neil, wait, Mike.
President David, fellow Rotarians, I have my guest today, Mr. Jay Adams, owner of Adams Commercial Real Estate and candidate for North Carolina House. Jay Adams.
Neil.
President Davis, I was walking in this afternoon, I took a phone call from Fred Goldsmith, the architect of Lenore football. He sends his warmest greeting to the Hickory Rotary Club. He spoke 4 times.
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
You said water, right?
Okay, any other visitors? Lindsay.
I have with me Jordan Ledford. She coordinates some teen programs at the Council on Adolescence with me. I also just wanted to put a little shout out to our fundraiser we're having tomorrow night. It's called the Event to Event. It benefits all of our programs at our agency. It's $50 a ticket. The Baby White Band will be there to get 2 drink vouchers with your meal. And I'll be selling tickets if you have any interest in coming. I'd love to have you tomorrow night at the top of the
Okay, great. Any other visitors? Okay, so after you go to that on Friday night, then Lisa's got something for you to do on Saturday, right?
Saturday night, and it is free. It's the 6th annual Lake Norman Folk Art Festival. Come see the Chicken Duck, and also come see 60 folk artists from all over the Southeast. Food, music, and we're going to have the same kind of weather we're having today. It's going to be gorgeous at the lake. So I hope you see you there. Thank you.
Okay. So that takes care of your Friday, that takes care of your Saturday, and then Sunday is the Carolina Cycle Challenge. So we could still use a few volunteers. We had the race course covered, and we had some defectors, and we had to fill in some gaps, and we really need 1 or 2 more. We also are going to have a table there that we're going to have some information about IDLE. We'll have some information about Imagination Library, and we could use a couple of people just to kind of man that table during the race. We kind of got it covered before the race and after, but during the race we need some. So if you can help at any time from 8 o'clock Sunday morning to 1:30, even if you got just an hour in there, then please see Ann Williams, and she will make sure that you've got a spot. Now, if you are on the course for the race, given directions and that sort of thing, you need to be at the Teen Center tonight at 6 o'clock. It'll be about 30 minutes, and they're going to make sure you get your t-shirt there and make sure you know exactly where you are and any kind of last-minute instructions. So if you can't, that's fine, but you know it's really going to be helpful if at least one of the people on that at your spot is there at 6 o'clock. Only be 30 or 40 minutes. Okay. Rotarian Idol. For you, those of you who don't know, we have a fundraiser called Rotarian Idol, and we're in our about 6th year. The date is March 14th, and auditions will be January 8th and 10th, and we are cranking it up. So this is something that involves everybody in the club. We want everybody's participation early and often. The committee met for the first time yesterday, getting started. We're trying to do some things that incorporate some additional service. We're going to have the contestants to work with us in some of our service projects. We're going to provide more outlets for tickets where you can sell the tickets a little easier, and we just want everybody to be more involved with Rotarian Idol this year. So John Rambo and Sandy Frothingham are graciously chairing that again and have already put a lot of work into it. Think about ads. We have several. We'll have a lot of the books from last year. I've got one. I know Lynn's got one. Steve, there are probably several around even today, but we'll make sure that there are some here that you can see who had ads last year. But just think about anybody that you do business with about getting an ad in this program, because that's of course one of the big parts of our fundraiser. $150, $250, and $500. Did I say that right?
Yep.
For the ads. Okay. Just think along those lines. And ticket sales, think about who you can get those to as we get closer to that. But ads really need to start pretty quick so we can get that closed out. We'll be talking about that again, as you might imagine. Every week, Steve has told me I've got to say something about it and inspire all of it. If you are on the Charitable Giving Committee, that committee is meeting. It was set as a what if, and there is something to go over. That will be Monday at 4 o'clock in the Salt Block in the Moretz boardroom. So Charitable Giving will meet as tentatively scheduled, is now firmed up, 4 o'clock on Monday at the Moretz boardroom. Okay, any other announcements? Okay, well, our visiting Rotarian, Sonny Hines, brings our program today, and I'll let him introduce it.
Thank you, President David. I appreciate that. The sequence of events that led to today's program first began in July 2012 when I received a somewhat less than stellar biopsy report. In fact, it was pretty poor. And so fast forward from that time for 5 months to December of that year, 2012, and upon my acceptance as a patient at the University of Florida Proton Therapy Institute in Jacksonville, I was placed under the care of our speaker today, Dr. Randall Henderson. And let me just note that the mistake in the bulletin is my fault. We knew that Dr. Nichols was not going to be here and that Dr. Henderson was going to be here, but I failed to get the work to Mark. So it's not Mark's doing, it's my doing, and I apologize for the screw up there. Dr. Henderson is a professor at the University of Florida's Department of Radiation Oncology and has served as the medical director of the University of Florida Jacksonville Department of Radiation Oncology since 1998. He also serves as associate medical director at the University of Florida Proton Therapy Institute, and that's where I was treated for my problems. He is a member of the board of directors of the Florida Society of Clinical Oncology. He specializes in the areas of prostate cancer, gynecologic malignancies, and lung cancer. His work has appeared in a number of scientific publications. I'm very appreciative, I want to mention this, I'm very appreciative of the invitation that Dr. Mark Anderson of the Viewmont Urology Group has extended to Dr. Henderson for him to share with a meeting with them this evening, which I very much appreciate, because as a benefactor of mine, Dr. Henderson has done a great job, and we're just trying to get the word out as one more alternative form of treatment for cancer. So please join me in welcoming my friend and benefactor, Dr. Randall Henderson.
Very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. I look forward to this. We have been to Hickory before. It was about 5 years ago. My wife and I came here at that point for a ballroom dance competition. Actually had a great time. So we were glad to be able to come back. So today what I'm going to do is talk with you a little bit about the difference between protons and x-rays, because x-rays, when you hear about people being treated for cancer with radiation, 98% of the time they're talking about x-ray treatment. Proton therapy is more recent in terms of being applied to the treatment of cancers. And we'll talk a little bit about the difference between those, and then specifically spend some time on prostate cancer treatment with protons. So protons have been known about for a long time, and that they had special properties that made them uniquely suited to treat cancer, and that they had advantages over X-rays. However, it was not felt that it was practical to build treatment centers for protons because it would be very complicated and expensive to do that. The advantage that was discovered is illustrated by this slide. And this is a CAT scan, and it's as though you were looking at a patient who's been sliced through the pelvic area, and they're laying face down, and you're looking at the spine, the kidneys. This is bowel, liver, so their back is here and their belly is here. So if I was going to be treating a patient who had a tumor of the spine with an X-ray beam, like would be traditionally done, it would be aimed from the back and go through, and that color wash is also kind of like a topographical map. The red area is where the hottest energy is deposited, down through the blue area that would be the coolest or the lowest dose of energy deposited. And then on the opposite side, it shows if I was to treat the same situation with proton beam, and the obvious thing is that protons stop. X-rays go all the way through. That's why you can take X-ray pictures and get the shadows of the bones with a chest X-ray, because they go all the way through. That has a problem associated with it because when you point it at a tumor, you're treating a lot of normal tissue all the way through that beam path. And with protons, we can stop, and I can stay off of the bowel, the kidneys, and really that lowers the risk of side effects during treatment and possible complications down the road. And then the other thing that is not quite as obvious, but if you look, the red area where the hottest radiation is between the skin and that red dot that represents the tumor in the spine area that, in this example. It's not actually where the tumor is itself. You're getting more dose to normal tissue between the skin and the tumor than you are to the tumor itself. Whereas with protons, we can put that hot area right where the tumor is, so that allows us to focus the radiation where it needs to be. And this actually just plots out how that energy is deposited. This is the most technical thing I'll show you today, but you can imagine on this axis, well, let's say the vertical axis is the depth through the body. If the skin is here, the beam is going this direction all the way out the other side of the patient. And on this axis is how much energy is deposited at any given depth. And for the X-ray beam, the skin is spared a little bit, but the highest dose is deposited within a couple of centimeters of the skin. And then when you get deeper and deeper to where the tumor is, you're actually getting less radiation to the tumor than you are to the tissues between the skin and the tumor. That's not a good thing, because there can be some important structures between the skin and the tumor. Whereas if you look at how protons are depositing that energy, they come in and they deposit less energy from the skin to the depth of the tumor, puts the maximum amount of energy here, and then stop. So that's really the basis for the advantage. And that area in red, that's the excess radiation that's deposited by a beam of radiation with X-rays that you can avoid if you treat that same area with a beam of proton therapy. And all that energy is deposited in normal tissues. So back in the 1950s, there were a few cancer patients that were being treated with protons, but only on physics research machines, not very many. The first facility to treat patients with a proton equipment designed to focus on treatment of cancer patients themselves was at Loma Linda, California in the early 90s. And their results have been so intriguing as they've treated quite a number of patients that led to a great deal of interest in building centers for making this treatment available to more patients across the country. We were the first center in the Southeast, the fifth to open in the United States, and we opened in 2006. The orange dots represent the proton facilities that are currently operational in the United States, and the blue dots are 10 additional units that are under construction. This is just a schematic, and I'm not going to spend much time here, but this is the heart of a proton facility. Up in the upper left-hand corner is a cyclotron that is a big electromagnet, and because protons they're a heavy charged particle, positively charged. So if you put them in a cyclotron, which is a big electromagnet and reverse the polarity, they actually will go in a circle and get faster and faster, close to the speed of light. And then you can split them off and send them down what we call a beam line, and it's a hollow tube with a deep vacuum if they travel down. And you can keep them focused with focusing magnets, and you can use bending magnets to make them turn, to go into treatment rooms where there are gantries that rotate about patients. And this just shows the actual cyclotron itself and the beginning of that beam line with the electromagnets. This is along that long beam line behind the 3 gantry rooms that we have where patients are treated. This shows one of the gantries being constructed to give you an idea of the scale of these gantries that rotate around the patients. They're about 3 stories high in order to bend those protons to where they need to go. And this shows a treatment room where a patient would be lying on a table and the protons would come out of that nozzle and be focused on the area of the body that we want to treat. This shows the variety of cancers that we are treating with protons at our facility, the University of Florida. This ability to spare the normal tissues is particularly important for treating pediatric tumors. And those are growing tissues. They're very sensitive to the effects of radiation. And a lot of these tumors are curable, and these children are going to live for 30, 40, 50 years and have a long time to experience the problems that you can see following radiation treatment. And so the more that we can get off of those normal tissues, the better those children do in the long run. And as a result of that, we have a very active pediatric program. Sonny was asking about that, and when he was there, we had a contract with Great Britain, which we still have, to treat their children. They don't have a proton facility. They're building 3. But in the meantime, they're sending their children for us to treat for them certain types of brain tumors, CNS tumors. Since he was there, we've signed contracts with Norway and Canada to treat their children as well. We currently have the largest pediatric proton program in the world in Jacksonville. And we also cooperate in research with St. Jude's Children's Hospital. They're building a proton facility there, but right now we're treating their pediatric tumors for them. Variety of other tumors, prostate cancer in sheer numbers, that's the largest program that we have right now, although these other programs are being developed. We're excited about our breast cancer program, which is more recent, and we're working on a macular degeneration program for eye treatment. So focusing on prostate cancer specifically, we've come a long way in the field of radiation oncology since we first started with x-rays. And if we look at the types of radiation distributions we're able to get going back a few decades, again, this is a CAT scan slice of the pelvis. And this patient's actually laying on their back, so this would be the back, their belly. These are the hips here. This is the prostate area. The pubic bone is here, but the prostate area. And this is the white area is actually a balloon that's put in the rectum to move it away from the prostate to try to protect it as much as possible. And what we're trying to do is radiate that prostate, and we ideally would like to stay off of everything else. But back in the 70s, our techniques and equipment weren't ideal. And as we've gone through the decades, you can see remember the red is the hottest area. We're tightening that up more and more around the prostate till we get to the modern X-ray approach of IMRT, and you've got a nice concentration of that high dose right where the prostate is. But actually what you've done in the process, remember each of those beams you're bringing in from different directions is putting more radiation between the skin and the target than it is in the target itself. So you're bringing in multiple beams to all intersect, but you're spreading that excess radiation around a lot of normal tissues, including the rectum, the entire rectal area there, and if you went to a little higher level, an entire section of the bladder is also getting that radiation exposure. By comparison, before I move on, there's a variety of machines that are used to deliver IMRT X-ray treatment these days, and some of them, if you had any family members that have been treated for cancer with radiation, might recognize TrueBeam or Novalis or CyberKnife, tomotherapy. There's a variety of them. But the one thing that they all have in common is that they all use that 6 million electron volt X-ray beam that's putting that energy in the same distribution we looked at, with more radiation between the surface of the skin and the target than in the target itself. So by comparison, this is what it would look like to treat a prostate with protons, where we're coming in from the sides. It's the optimal direction to stay off the maximum amount of bladder and rectum. And we're bringing the beams in. We've got the radiation concentrated where we want it. We're staying off a lot of normal tissues. You might notice one of the sensitive areas right next to the prostate is the rectum. More than half the rectum is getting 0 radiation, which is really nice in terms of long-term function and protecting that area. And if we were at a little higher level, you would see the same thing with bladder. In fact, I think I have a slide that shows that. This is a side view, looking from the side. So the belly is over here. The back is here. This is the tailbone. This is the pubic bone. This is the prostate right here. This is that balloon looking from the side view that's in the rectum, and part of the rectum is back here as well. The balloon's there. So when you come in from the side with the protons, this bladder is, you're staying off more of the bladder, and a lot of the rectum is getting 0 dose. Just this little part right there is getting irradiated. This is the IMRT X-ray distribution, so that you're getting more of the bladder and all of the rectum getting radiation effects in the long run. So in terms of results with radiation, I'm going to run through this quickly. Basically, when we look at the risk of having a long-term problem from the radiation with protons, for GI or rectal problems is 1%. For bladder problems, it was 5.4%. We wanted to compare that with the X-ray results. We had a little bit of a problem, though, because they use a different grading scale. We used version 3. This one came out more recently, called version 4. And Memorial Sloan Kettering, which has an excellent IMRT X-ray treatment program for prostate cancer, used version 4. So when we converted our scoring over to version 4, we found that we actually had a little less likelihood of rectal problems. It was down to 0.5%, and our bladder problems with that measurement tool was half what they saw with IMRT. There was something else that we found when the patients were actually scoring their own level of difficulty with bladder and rectal problems after treatment. We found that when we compared our results with protons for looking at something like the problem of bowel urgency, meaning when the urge to go have a bowel movement hits you, can you wait? Or do you have to go right then or you're in trouble? And so looking at that measure and how frequent bowel movements were, when a patient reported that they had moderate or greater problems with IMRT, it was about 15 and 10%. With proton therapy, it was half that. Again, going back to if we can stay off the normal tissue like the rectum, it's just going to function better in the long run. Also, I think most people are aware that radiation can cause cancer, and that's an unusual thing. And when you're faced with a life-threatening illness like cancer, and you have a high likelihood of being able to help that cancer or make it go away permanently, that trade-off of the very small risk that at some point, years down the road, you might have a cancer caused from radiation, is a price that is often a small price to pay. But it is something that's of concern. And when you look at the data in patients treated with IMRT X-ray treatment for prostate cancer, or with radiation seed implants, and you look 10 years down the road at Memorial Sloan Kettering, they found that they saw cancers that were caused by that radiation treatment in 2 to 4% of the patients. There's been a number of studies looking at comparing protons to IMRT and determining how do protons stack up on that risk of causing cancer. And you might imagine if you can keep the radiation off of more tissue, then that tissue is spared the risk of developing a cancer down the road. And in fact, it's been calculated that the risk of causing a cancer by protons is about 5 times less than with IMRT X-ray treatment. Another thing that has been published that was kind of interesting is the effect of scatter radiation from IMRT to the surrounding tissues like the testicular region. And the testicles they produce testosterone, and the cells that produce testosterone are actually very, very sensitive to radiation. So you can use that testosterone level as a way to measure how much scatter radiation actually got to that area that you didn't intend to irradiate. And there's been 3 studies that have shown that the testosterone levels actually go down because of that radiation effect on those tissues following IMRT, X-ray treatment, or X-ray treatment for prostate cancer. We've done 3 studies now with proton therapy in our patients, and we found that there is no effect on testosterone whatsoever from the proton therapy. And that's really what we expected, because the protons are so much better confined. A lot of our patients are very interested in erectile function and how the treatment that they go through is going to affect them in the long term in terms of the quality of their life. And we did a study looking at our patients that were 60 years old and younger, over 250 of them, because they were more likely to be sexually active. And what we saw was that if they were sexually active at baseline, 86% were, and if we look 2 years later, 73% still were, so there was a drop of about 13%. If we looked at the group of men within this that were sexually active at least once a week prior to proton therapy, that declined by 11%. And there are other things that can affect whether or not someone's likely to have difficulty with erectile function, aside from the main factor is just aging. But within any age group, the risk increases if you're obese or if you're diabetic. And when we looked at our patients who were sexually active prior to proton therapy, and they were not obese or diabetic, and we looked again 2 years later, 94% were still doing fine. So when you compare that kind of result with proton therapy to surgical options and the other options that are available for treating prostate cancer, that holds up very well. And then the risk of leaking urine is always a question as well from patients. And the risk that we saw of having a little bit of leaking of urine was a little less than 2% following proton therapy. And then the control rates. We've been very encouraged about our ability to control cancer. Again, we compared our results with protons to the IMRT results at Memorial Sloan Kettering. I'm not going to go into this, but this just basically says that our treatment regimens were fairly comparable. The groups were followed for about the same length of time, so we felt good about comparing with their results. And the chance that there was no sign of cancer 5 years down the road after proton therapy was 99% with our low-risk group, 99% with intermediate, and then 76% with high risk. When we think about prostate cancer, we divide them into the most favorable, the least aggressive prostate cancers. That's the low risk, intermediate, or a little more aggressive. High risk are really fairly rapidly growing cancers for prostate cancer. And we've expanded these initial results were with our patients on our first protocols, less than 100 patients in each of those groups. We've expanded that now to look at our first 1,500 patients. And it's still 99% control rate with the low risk, 95% control rate with the intermediate risk patients, and 75% with the high risk group as well. So again, that stacks up really well. When we looked at Memorial Sloan Kettering's results with IMRT, they did well with the low risk patients, but they didn't do as well with the IMRT for their intermediate risk group of patients. We're seeing about a 10% better control rate with protons. And we think that has to do with how effective the protons are in actually killing those cancer cells. And our results held up well with the high-risk group as well. I'm going to skip that and just tell you that the bottom line is that we're excited about our proton program that we're offering for a lot of different cancer types. We're still very encouraged about our results and excited about the results we're seeing with prostate cancer. And we're always very glad to have the opportunity to let people know that this is an option, because a lot of people are very familiar with surgery, the idea that radiation is a choice, but the idea of protons as being a potential option is not always well known about. And so I really thank you for allowing me to just give you a little bit of information about that today. Thank you again.
Any questions?
With Bowman Gray, Duke, and Carolina, why is there no proton
is there no proton therapy on the books for those institutions? And I don't know. I'm not certain. Yeah, what the plans are going forward. I do know that Emory is building a unit. Mayo Clinic is building 2, Rochester in Arizona. The technology has been quite expensive. It's coming down in price, so you don't have to build a center as big as ours. Now you can actually buy one-room units that really brings the price down. And it's like anything else, this technology, as it becomes more widely adopted, it's like computers that get cheaper and better as time goes on. So I think as the price becomes less of an issue, you're going to see this adopted in more and more radiation centers going on. Yes?
How is the insurance industry embracing this? Are they covering?
It's mixed. Some insurance companies cover it, some do not. And so, and sometimes we can work with patients to appeal to the companies, and they will, approve it. But it really depends on the company. Yes.
How long does it take for this to operate? You do it one time, or you do it multiple times?
Oh, great question. How much time does it take to get a treatment with this? Well, if you compare, it depends. The standard traditional treatment is about 8 weeks of daily treatments. Same as with IMRT, X-ray treatment. But because we're staying off those tissues very well, we're more and more frequently using a newer approach that has fewer treatments, a little bigger dose each day, but a shorter course. And we have a 5.5-week course that now is very frequently used, and we're looking at perhaps even a little bit shorter course. We've been so successful with that 5.5 weeks.
What is the treatment cost differential between proton and IMRT?
Okay, what is the cost differential? It depends upon the insurance company and whether you're talking about Medicare or private insurance, that sort of thing. Charges are quite variable. If you look at what's actually reimbursed for the treatment, and you look at, for example, Medicare, proton therapy is reimbursed about 30% more than IMRT X-ray treatment. But again, it's highly dependent on which form of coverage you're talking about. Other questions? Again, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity very much.
Well, thank you so much. I want to present you with a copy of our 4-way test that we as Rotarians live by, and you'll display that. And you have a guest you want to recognize?
I do. I have my lovely wife with me today, Jean.
Hi.
Susan, we got Obamacare. It covers everything, right? It's everything. I hope we get one of those, because I know I can't afford to lose any more testosterone, so I need to get one soon. And I need a good project at Fry, construction practice. Okay, service plus health.
Everybody chip in and give him a patch. That roll.
Remember your cart buckets? Contribute to that. You lose change, folding money, anything you want to put in there.
Today we have 33 cards, 1 joker. We took in $70 for a total of $13.40.
Today's winner, 544106. 544106. All right. Good. These financial guys take a long time to check numbers. And loser, good. We love failure. Okay, remember, we need a few volunteers. Please see Ann afterwards if you can do any time whatsoever on Sunday morning. That's Rotary Day in Catawba County, in case you didn't know. So even if you can just come out and be at the Y, that would be supported. So we would appreciate that. And if you're on the course, 6 o'clock tonight at the Teen Center. Charitable giving Monday at 4. Any other announcements before we? Neil.
President, you've inadvertently overlooked one of the colorful characters of this club. We're not going to have our sunshine report today. But Charles,
You know what? You're right. My bad. We can't not have the sunshine. Thank you, Neil. I had so many announcements, this is a golden moment, too.
We could have let it go.
I'm sorry. My fault.
Thanks a lot, Neil. You know, they're talking about those 6,000 volts or whatever. I bet erectile dysfunction would be good if you had 6,000 volts going on. We have a lot of birthdays this week. 10 birthdays. It's the core of the club. Dean Doucette, William Miller Zarrell, Jay Adams, Robert Bumbarger, Clem Geithner, Dallas Abbey, Raven Barron, George Furlong, past President Susan, and myself. I have a birthday. Next Wednesday, I'll be 72 years old, you know, and God dog, you get to be 72 years old. You're old. You're just old. You just, you know, I feel good, and I like to do a lot of stuff, but hell, if you're 72, you're old. You know? Nothing I can do about it. But birthdays mark ages, you know, marks your age. And it makes me think about my old buddy Bones McKinney, Horace Albert Bones McKinney, and funniest man I've ever known in my life. Bones said you could tell you was getting old when you go out in the morning and get the newspapers in the driveway. It'd be the Hickory paper, the Sharp paper, and maybe a couple of circulars laying there. And old Bones, he'd kick them all up in one pile so he don't have to bend over one time. He knew he was getting old. You know, there's a book called Bones, and just by coincidence, that lady's coming sometime this fall to talk about her book and sell her book, I guess. And but I've read it. It's a good book. Old Bones, he did a lot. He got a lot done. And as I say, he's funny, and I'll tell a couple stories about him. He was drafted to play in the National Basketball Association with the Washington team, and this was a long time ago. And the players, they had to share a room in the hotel then, and they had a tradition that the youngest player had to sleep with the player that snored the worst. And of course, Bones was just drafted, so he had to sleep with this guy that could just peel the wallpaper off the wall. And all the team was gathered down in the coffee shop in the morning to see old Bones come in, all bloodshot eyes and everything. Actually, Bones came in, he was pretty chipper. And this other guy that snored so bad came in, and he looked awful. Hadn't slept at all. And they were all amazed, and they wanted to know what happened. Mom said, well, I don't know. I slept good. He said, you know, right before I turned the light out to go to sleep, I gave him a little kiss on the cheek, jumped in the bed, and went to sleep. And he probably did that. He probably did that. And then I think it's my favorite joke of all time. This was Bonesy, and he grew up in Durham, but he had relatives down at Sea Level, North Carolina. Uncle John ain't Sadie lived down there. I actually drove to Sea Level one time just to visualize that long, skinny thing walking along the road down there. But there is a Sea Level. It's kind of out of the way, but it's down there on the coast, of course. Bones always said his mother had sent him down there in the summer so Uncle John could work him to death and she wouldn't have to feed him anymore. But he said that they got up one morning at 4 o'clock in the morning and worked on Uncle John's boat, and they were in there eating lunch, and each one of them, Uncle John himself, was laying on a sofa trying to rest a little bit, and somebody knocked on the front door and Aunt Sadie went to answer it. And this fella threw a handful of cow manure on the only carpet that they had in the house. And before anybody could say anything, this guy said, "Don't you worry about it, ma'am." Said, "If this machine I got here in my hand won't pick it up, I'll eat it." And Aunt Sadie said, "Well, get down on your hands and knees. We ain't got no electricity." So one final thought. This doesn't have anything to do with bones. This was, I don't know where this came from. It's not original. I read it somewhere. But good judgment comes from experience. And most experience comes from bad judgment.
Thank you, Neil. That was probably the worst mistake I almost made. Not having that before. Okay, any further announcements? Let's stand and adjourn before we do. Of the things we think, say, and do, truth,
and all concerned, will build goodwill and better friendships, will be beneficial to all.